Barney. Thanks for talking to us.
No worries. Anytime.
Yeah, so we live in strange times at the moment. How have you and the rest of Napalm Death coped with lockdown?
Yeah, I haven't really seen the guys, I must be honest. I've seen them a couple of times just because we needed to kind of congregate. We were kind of 10 foot across the room from each other, so we were sticking to obviously the sort of accepted, methodology now for doing that. No, I haven't seen much of them. Danny went back to the States because there was a lot of uncertainty around, being here with the lockdown and stuff. So he didn't really want to get locked down over here, and he's gone back to be with his family. So it's fair enough. Shane, I haven't seen for a bit. He's all right as far as I know. I haven't spoken to him much, but he's got his immediate family to deal with. He's got a couple of kids and that. But I live on my own, so I've been. It's been all right for me, because I've only got myself to answer to, and I live pretty simply anyway. So just had to make a couple more adjustments, and I've got through it all right, But like I say, it's a different story really if you've got dependents or family or whatever. It's I know it's been pretty tricky. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're one of the most travelled and hardest working bands on the scene. So, how much has the restrictions affected the Napalm touring machine?
Yeah, well, it has completely. To be honest, like everybody else. We haven't. The last gig we did, we were lucky that our tour, one we did in Europe with I Hate God and a couple of other bands, that finished in mid-March. So it was lockdown was almost, the kind of realisation of it was just coming into play. So we just finished that, but we haven't gigged since then. We haven't been able to. Nobody has. There was that sort of online thing came into the sphere, but for us, we sort of thought about it, and because Napalm is so immediate as a live band, I think it didn't seem to have the concept of it didn't seem to have anywhere near the same oomph, or impact. So at that point, we kind of chewed it over and we just decided against it. I know a lot of bands did it, but we just thought not for us. Although, we were always up for reconsidering it, if things were to go on and on and on. So
yeah, I was going to say if this lasts into next year, which it probably will at this point, is that something you will consider changing your mind on?
Yeah, but still, it would still have to have the creative merit, to be able to do it. If Napalm's never been a band to do something just for the sake of it, if it has no intrinsic, creative value, then you'd say, what's the fucking point, So, but we have some gigs on the schedule. We've got one in Brighton, which is actually just down the road from me, in November. So that's still on the schedule. It might happen. We've also got some stuff in the Czech Republic in November, and Czech Republic's actually been having gigs. So that have gone all right, and no discernible infection rises, around the people that attended or in the towns themselves. So there are things on the cards before next year. So, but the situation could change, if I don't know if you're aware, but apparently, in Europe, certainly infections have been going up, and there was a thing on the news last night that there's been a rise. Quite a considerable rise in the national population here. Yeah. So we don't know yet. It could. We'll see. It's just take it as it comes at this point. So.
All right. So getting away from the COVID situation, the new album Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism comes out next week. It's a very strong album title. So what's your thinking behind that?
Yeah, so there has been some, people have tried to draw parallels between the COVID situation. I know you were trying to, divert away from that, but people have said, oh yeah, well, there's a couple of titles that coincidentally people have drawn parallels it, but it's not. It's nothing to do with it, you know. And when Napalm would write about something like that anyway, like the only aspects that we write about is the way it affects people, you know, in terms of the continuing, you know, sort of marginalisation of people. That would be the only sort of time we would think about it. But yeah, so. The main thrust of this album is actually discrimination and dehumanisation, which you would think is not sort of not an uncommon topic for Napalm. But everything is always, whatever we write about, I try to make it current and specific to the times we're living in. So the kind of discrimination and dehumanisation that we're talking about is now been adopted by governments around the world. You know, for example, you've only got to look across the Atlantic, and I'm always loath to basically mention him, you know, because it's perhaps a very obvious thing to do. But, you know, the sort of way he's marginalised groups of people to suit his own ends, and you know, it just is typical, you know, of what. Of the current climate. You know, we also have governments in Europe right now that are formulating social policy around the sort of dehumanisation of like groups like LGBTQ plus people. You know, who in some countries are so like ill thought about that. For example, in one country, the government has made great pains to trumpet, we have gay-free zones in some of our cities where these people aren't even a thing, you know, and it's like the kind of insanity of that to me really kind of speaks volumes. Also, of course, very sort of current is the situation with refugees, you know, or people just migrating from one place to another, you know, due to circumstances, you know. I think the language around that, the treatment of these people, the perception of these people, to me, is very concerning, you know, because this, like, not necessarily the UK government, but there are governments across Europe who have successfully, I think, transplanted in people's minds that these people are just a threat to a lot of cultural aspects of indigenous populations. And of course, when you can transplant those ideas into people, there are several steps beyond that. So then first you have the idea, then you have the kind of social aggravation on the streets, you know, then it leads to kind of violent confrontations, and like a couple of steps down the line from that, it can lead to fucking mass murder, you know. Yeah. I mean, when I sort of equate that, when I talk about that stuff, people have said to me, "Oh no, you know, well, it's not the same as like the 1930s and stuff like that." But yeah, but it is, because that's the way it starts. You know, it's the same step of events. You know, it's the same charismatic people in power that manage to transplant these ideas into people's minds, you know, and it's only a few steps away from that, you know. So never say never, you know. We said, you know, I said never again, you know, to you know, the whole idea of, you know, the kind of concentration camp things that happened in the 1930s, but people saying never again doesn't necessarily mean there's not a prospect of it happening again, you know, and it could, you know. So I just thought it was really important to expose that, you know, and obviously for Napalm Death, as always, to be the antithesis to those kind of ideas, you know. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned the refugee situation and your latest video, Bellyful of Salt and Spleen. The video for that and the lyrics are particularly poignant in that area. Yeah.
I mean, we wanted to show how even, I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't find it a tricky subject to talk about, because why would I? You know, I'm a human being. You know, it's my part of my role as a human being is to look out for other human beings. You know, so I don't find it tricky to talk about. But it's like, it's a tricky situation that it's not. I'm not aiming it at people who have particular mindsets that would be against people that migrate and stuff, because I understand that these people have conditioned to kind of think this way, to have a fear that spins these outlandish ideas that somehow people that come into the country from other places are going to pollute the environment. They're going to change change the almost down to the biology of the population. I mean, it's quite crazy ideas. But yeah, I mean, it symbolically wanted to show the way that people sometimes they've been desensitized, they're like bodies washing up on a beach, I mean, yeah, to be fair, a lot of people are pretty sickened by that, but they still, in the next moment, they kind of forget about it, and it's like that the whole way we tried to portray it in the video was like people taking selfies, of next to bodies washed up on a beach, as if it's like the equivalent of, yeah, look at that sunset, let's take a picture of us against the sunset. It's like, yeah, and it's that kind of desensitization, and another thing to say about it in the video as well is if you look at one particular frame, you'll see like a newspaper with a headline, of like, refugees do this and that, and the horror stories that are perpetuated. I mean, I am one for, a free press, and that means right across the board. I think ideas, as much as I might find them, fucking fairly, they might sicken me a little bit, I do understand the need to have all those different perspectives. But on the other side of that, it's like, I don't think these people that write these headlines realise how much damage in human terms they do sometimes, and they propagate myths a lot of the times. These whole human invasion stories that were propagated, a few years ago during the Brexit, sort of back and forth, these vans, going around telling people to go home, and these mythical fucking billboards of like queues of people, just like that whole stuff. It all turned out to be bullshit at the end, and I could have told you that fucking 3 years ago, So
I think many of us could have and did say at the time that it was all bullshit, but it depends in what you believe in, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so, but again, it's down to the condition. I think we have to get away from this narrative that other people, that may have come from other places because they look slightly different, or there are slight differences in the way that people live, or, it's like you just have to understand. We have to like rewind a little bit and understand that we are all human beings, and there is space for all of us in this world, which is why I think borders are such an anachronism. They put up fences, of course, in one respect. And this whole thing about, borders, protect the borders, protect the population. They were never designed for that in the first place. They were there to protect the interests of the powerful. This whole thing about, borders, protect the population. It's to my mind, it's a nonsense, So
yeah, I am completely with you on that.
So
So I'm assuming the lyrical content on the album is probably your domain. So where do you find the inspiration? And inspiration is probably the wrong word, but where do you find the inspiration for the topics you delve into?
Like I say, mate, I'm an information sponge. I'm always got my one eye on what's going on around me, in the rest of the world, because I just feel inclined to take an interest. I'm a human being, I want to know what's going on, not in my backyard necessarily. I have a human interest in that. So I do have a knowledge of a spread of like what's going on around and about me. So then when it comes time to write a Napalm album, I will latch onto what needs to be exposed in my personal opinion, and obviously when we do write those lyrics, is keep it current, because I think if you want the ideas to get across to people, whatever they do with those ideas, you need to have a hook in terms of it being contemporary. If you just do something that's generic, like, for example, ban the bomb, no more war. Well, yes, we know that already, and I'm on board completely with that. But if you want people to understand in terms of the horrors of war, you need to make it specific to situations that are going on currently, Otherwise, people will just go, yeah, okay, it's another album that tells me kind of what I already know, that I'm against war and I'm against, nuclear proliferation and stuff. Well, yeah, okay, but so you need to make it so, like a current scenario, I think it's quite essential in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, is there anything you want the listener to take away having listened to this new album?
Well, I just think the very things we've spoken about. I would. My preference is that if people had their doubts, about what I'm saying, is that you chew it over a little bit and see what you can do with it. Don't just take my word for it. Go and search out other sources of information, that are there to speak up for people that migrate, and just go and look across the board and see what the real situation is. That's what I personally would prefer. But then I also have to say this as well, Tim, if people want to come in and toss around the ideas and find out that it's not for them, well, great. If people just want to come in and even deal with the music, even want to deal with that, then you know what, Tim, I have no problem with that, because if music is anything, it's one of the last bastions of freedom, and it's accessible to everybody, and it also means that you can go into it at any perspective that you wish to, So,
not wanting to talk about lockdown again, but did it have any effect on the recording of the album, or did you have all of that wrapped up before?
No, it was all wrapped up. Yeah, there wasn't. Luckily, we were all done with it. So I don't know if I mentioned at the start of this, but there were some parallels made to some of the lyrics and the COVID and the lockdown. And it's just pure coincidence. There's nothing to say about that.
Fair enough. So I just wanted to ask, how's Mitch?
Yeah, all right. As far as I know, I don't. He recorded the album with us, but he didn't write any stuff on this album, we gave him the option to write some stuff, like I said, but he chose to pass on it, because I think his family situation was quite busy, and there wasn't a big time frame for him to get the stuff ready, and he just passed on it. So, but we said, do you at least want to come over and play on the album, and so he agreed to that, and it was great. I haven't seen him since. I've communicated with him a few times through email. So right now, what's going on, I couldn't really say, but he seems to be doing all right. He's not played with the band for many years, and realistically, whether he does or not, well, I'm not too sure about that, But I still love him. He's as I ever did, So yeah, that's never going to change, So.
Yeah. So you've got John now as your touring guitarist. Does he have any input into the new material?
No, he didn't. He played on a few things on the record. We sort of because he wanted to, so we kind of said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. But no, he didn't. To be honest, I mean, the core of the band really now at this point, realistically, is me, Shane, and Danny. So I think realistically, creatively, writing music from here on in, it will be like me, Shane, and Danny. So. That's how it'll be, Again, there's no ulterior motive to that. It's just that's how we want to keep it, So.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So with the album coming out, what happens next with the touring machine ground to a halt? What are Napalm's plans?
Mate, we don't have any. Is the straight answer. It's just I'm doing interviews like fucking crazy. I mean. See, our policy with Napalm is that if you want to talk to Napalm, you get to talk to Napalm. That's it. It's that simple. We're not one of these, oh, we only do the bigger. Nah, fuck it. Mate, here's the thing. If it wasn't for small, very minimal, limited fanzines, like way back in the mists of time, Napalm arguably wouldn't even exist. So I feel it's always the right and logical thing to speak to anybody that wants to speak. The day you got to worry is when people don't want to talk about your band anymore. So that's what I'm doing, mate. I must have done, I reckon, in the past few weeks, I've done over 100 interviews easy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I haven't repeated too many of the questions you already had.
Yeah, no, it's all good. The thing is, mate, you can't. There's a pool of questions that need to be asked. And I'm not gonna like turn my nose up at anything. Every sort of a fanzine or magazine or podcast or whatever, they all need to have those questions answered. They're kind of par for the course. They're relevant to the album, so they need to get asked. I'll just, if I need to say the answers again, then I'll say the answers again. It's not a fucking hardship. You know what I mean? So
yeah. So as we come to the end of the interview, I've got one last question for you, and
sure.
It's fairly open-ended. So I don't know if you'll be able to answer it. But you've been in the band for more than 30 years now. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, you should always learn lessons along the way, because I think we made some decisions. We allowed ourselves to be talked into a few things down the years that I think ethically or artistically, creatively, were not our first choice. We're not great, and so hopefully we've learned from those lessons and we don't repeat those mistakes, and the one thing I would say is that, as we spoke about earlier on in this interview, always listen to other perspectives, always listen to other ideas and chew them over and see where they are. But if you do that and you still come to the conclusion that, no, these are not appropriate for us, then you do what you feel is the right thing. Because then you live and die by your own decisions, and if you do something that doesn't stick, you've only got yourself to blame, if there is any blame to be apportioned, so it's the best way to be as far as I'm concerned. And it's always served us well. I mean, fuck, we're here like 40 years, from the formation of the band, almost 30 years since I joined the band. So, and we're still independent, we're on our 16th album, and for a fucking noise band, I mean, that's not bad going, I would say. So there must be something in the mechanics that we're doing okay with, I would suggest.
I think it's a combination of either your sound or your lyrical content, or both, resonates with many of the listeners over the years.
Go hand in hand, Tim, at the end of the day. They're both as important as each other, I think.
Absolutely. So, thank you for talking to us today, Barney. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime, mate. Not a problem.
All right. Have a good one.
All the best, Tim. Stay safe, mate.
And you. Cheers, mate.